Have you ever woken up paralyzed, unable to move or speak, with a terrifying presence in the room? This is sleep paralysis, a chilling experience that millions have endured. Join me as we delve into the creepy stories of this nightmarish reality. Welcome to this exploration of one of the most terrifying phenomena that can occur during our most vulnerable state, sleep. Today we're diving deep into the mysterious and often horrifying world of sleep paralysis. This is going to be an in-depth examination of true experiences, both personal and shared by others, along with a comprehensive look at what science tells us about this disturbing condition. For those unfamiliar with the term, sleep paralysis is a temporary inability to move or speak that occurs when you're waking up or falling asleep. During these episodes, you're conscious and aware of your surroundings, but your body remains completely immobilized. What makes this experience particularly terrifying is that it's often accompanied by vivid hallucinations, visual, auditory, and even tactile sensations that can make you believe something sinister is present in your room. According to medical literature, sleep paralysis occurs when there's a disconnect between your brain and body during the transition between sleep stages. Normally, when we enter REM sleep, the stage where most dreaming occurs, our brain naturally paralyzes our voluntary muscles to prevent us from acting out our dreams. Sometimes, this mechanism misfires, and we become conscious while our body remains in this paralyzed state. The hallucinations that accompany sleep paralysis are thought to be dream imagery bleeding into waking consciousness. When you're caught between sleep and wakefulness, your brain attempts to make sense of this unusual state, often creating frightening explanations for why you can't move. This is why so many people report seeing dark figures, feeling presences in the room, or experiencing the sensation of being held down or attacked. Risk factors for sleep paralysis include irregular sleep schedules, sleep deprivation, stress, anxiety, certain medications, and sleeping on your back. Some studies suggest that up to 8% of the general population experiences sleep paralysis at least once in their lifetime, though for some unfortunate individuals, it can be a recurring nightmare. Let me share my first encounter with this phenomenon, which occurred when I was just 13 years old. It was during the Christmas season, and I remember this timing specifically because it played a crucial role in what happened. For 2 consecutive days, my brother and I had been helping our aunt prepare for her annual Christmas celebration. This wasn't just any ordinary holiday gathering, it was an elaborate affair that required extensive preparation. My aunt's Christmas celebrations were legendary in our family. She would transform her entire property into a winter wonderland, complete with multiple Christmas trees, elaborate light displays, and decorations covering every square inch of available space. The outdoor areas received just as much attention as the indoor spaces, with lights strung through trees and carefully arranged displays that would make professional decorators envious. The preparation work was exhausting. We would arrive at her house around 9 in the morning and work straight through until 8, 9, sometimes even 10 o'clock at night. We cleaned, decorated, arranged furniture, tested lights, prepared guest rooms, and handled countless other tasks that go into hosting a gathering for 30 to 40 family members. The physical exhaustion from these long days of manual labor should have guaranteed deep, restful sleep. However, I experienced what many people know all too well, that frustrating second wind that hits just as you arrive home. Despite being utterly drained during the drive back, the moment I stepped through my own door, a surge of energy would course through me, making sleep impossible. This pattern continued for both days. I would finally succumb to exhaustion around 5 or 6 in the morning, only to be awakened by my alarm at 8 to start the cycle again. Over those 48 hours, I accumulated perhaps 4 hours of sleep total, a dangerous level of sleep deprivation that would have serious consequences. On the evening of the second day, we finally completed the preparations. I was beyond exhausted, operating on pure autopilot. I skipped dinner entirely, my body craving sleep more than sustenance. I stumbled to my bedroom around 10 o'clock and collapsed onto my bed, still wearing my clothes from the day. Sleep claimed me instantly. I slept deeply through the night and well into the next morning. When consciousness finally returned around 10:30 a.m., I found myself lying on my stomach, my left arm tucked beneath my pillow, my face turned toward the television and bedroom door. At the foot of my bed, my closet door stood open. It could never close properly due to the mountain of clothes I'd carelessly tossed inside, a typical teenage oversight. As awareness returned, I could hear the familiar sounds of morning activity from the kitchen. Someone moving about, perhaps making coffee or preparing breakfast. The normalcy of these sounds provided a false sense of security that would soon be shattered. I attempted to rise, thinking I should let my family know I was awake after sleeping for nearly 12 hours. But my body refused to respond. Every command my brain sent to my muscles disappeared into a void. I tried moving my toes, my fingers, my legs, nothing. The only parts of my body that retained any function were my eyes, darting frantically beneath closed lids. Panic began to set in as I realized something was seriously wrong. I focused all my mental energy on moving any part of my body, desperate to break free from this invisible restraint. Then, in the midst of my struggle, I felt something wrapped around my right ankle. The touch wasn't violent or sudden. It was deliberate, purposeful, like someone taking your hand for a handshake. The pressure was firm but not painful, conveying clear intent. In that moment of contact, somehow, my body responded just enough to allow me to shift that leg slightly. The small movement gave me hope. If I could move once, perhaps I could move again. But before I could attempt another movement, I felt the same deliberate grip close around my left ankle. My heart rate skyrocketed as I realized this wasn't just a case of waking up with temporary paralysis. Something was actively engaging with me, something I couldn't see or identify. Again, through sheer force of will, I managed to shake my left leg just enough to break the grip. My mind raced with the logical thought that legs are meant for movement. If I could get them working, I could use them as leverage to pull the rest of my body into action. Then both ankles were seized simultaneously. This time the grip was entirely different. Gone was the measured, almost polite pressure from before. This was forceful, angry, filled with malevolent intent. Whatever had been toying with me moments earlier was now furious at my resistance. The pressure on my ankles was painful, communicating a clear message: you will not escape. I fought against the restraint with every ounce of mental energy I possessed, but my body remained frozen. Then the unthinkable happened. I began to move, but not of my own volition. Whatever held my ankles started pulling me down the bed toward the open closet. The sensation was horrifyingly real. I felt my jeans riding up uncomfortably as my body was dragged across the sheets. My t-shirt rolled up beneath my stomach, bunching under my chest. My face slid off the pillow, my arms straightening as I was pulled away from the headboard. By the time the pulling stopped, I was hanging off the foot of my bed up to mid-calf. In that moment, the paralysis shattered. Adrenaline flooded my system as I yanked my legs up to my chest and scrambled backward until my back hit the wall. The only sound that escaped my lips was a terrified scream from my mother, a primal cry for protection that overrode any teenage embarrassment about appearing scared. But the true horror was yet to come. As I pressed myself against the wall, my eyes locked onto something that shouldn't have existed. In the darkness of my closet, I saw a face, if you could call it that. The closest comparison I can make is to those tragedy masks used in theater, but twisted into an expression of pure rage. The face was stark white, like porcelain or bone, with features that seemed carved from nightmares. The eyes were voids, not black in the sense of color, but black in the sense of absolute emptiness, as if looking into holes in reality itself. The mouth was the same, a yawning chasm of nothingness that opened wider than any human mouth should. From that terrible void came a sound I'll never forget, a roar or scream filled with such intense fury that it seemed to vibrate through my very bones. Then, as suddenly as it began, everything stopped. The face vanished, the sensation of being grabbed disappeared, and I was left alone in my room, trembling against the wall. This experience haunted me for years. I told only a select few family members about it, and their reactions were predictably split between stunned silence and suggestions that it was merely a vivid nightmare. But I know the difference between dreams and reality. I've had nightmares that left me drenched in sweat, gasping for air, requiring hours of distraction before I could sleep again. This was something else entirely. Years passed before I encountered sleep paralysis again. I was 22 or 23, living in an apartment in Greensboro, North Carolina. Life had changed dramatically. I was working night shifts at a grocery store, trying to balance work with aspirations of content creation. The irregular schedule and chronic sleep deprivation created perfect conditions for another episode. That particular day, I'd finished an especially grueling shift. I'd worked from 10 at night until nearly noon, stocking shelves and dealing with the various challenges of overnight retail work. A coworker drove me home since my partner had our car for a babysitting job. I was exhausted beyond description. I entered our apartment, shed my work clothes, and collapsed into bed wearing only my underwear. It was around 11 in the morning and my partner wouldn't be home until 4 or 5. I planned to sleep until they returned, then share dinner before my next shift. Sleep came instantly, deep and dreamless. When I woke, I found myself lying on my right side, facing the bedroom window with my back to the room's interior and the hallway beyond. Immediately, I recognized the familiar, terrifying sensation. I couldn't move. The memories of my teenage experience flooded back, sending my anxiety skyrocketing. But this time, the manifestation was different. Instead of physical contact, I heard footsteps, soft, deliberate steps on the carpet behind me. The sound was subtle but unmistakable, each footfall creating a gentle compression of carpet fibers. My first thought was relief. My partner must have come home early. But as the steps continued their slow approach, something felt wrong. Why were they moving so carefully, so deliberately? The footsteps reached the edge of the bed and stopped. In that silence, I knew with absolute certainty that whatever stood behind me was not my partner. The presence felt wrong, alien, dangerous. I remained frozen, both by the paralysis and by primitive fear, as seconds stretched into what felt like hours. I remembered advice I'd read about breaking sleep paralysis. Focus on small movements first. One of my arms hung off the bed's edge, so I concentrated all my effort on moving my thumb. After what seemed like an eternity, it twitched. The tiny movement gave me hope, and I pushed harder, eventually managing to clench my entire hand into a fist. Like a dam breaking, the paralysis released. I gasped, drawing in air I didn't realize I'd been denying myself, and shot upright. The room was empty. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, revealing nothing out of place. I grabbed my phone to check the time, nearly 6 o'clock. A text from my partner explained they were running late, their mother needing extra help at work. The realization that I'd been alone the entire time made the experience infinitely worse. Whatever had stood at my bedside existed only in that liminal space between sleep and waking, or perhaps in some other realm that occasionally bleeds into ours. I spent the remaining hours until my partner's return in the living room, unable to look away from the bedroom doorway. Every shadow seemed threatening, every small sound a potential warning of return. When they finally arrived home around 8, I said nothing about the experience, maintaining a facade of normalcy while internally processing the terror. My third and most recent encounter with sleep paralysis occurred in my current home, roughly 4 years ago. The circumstances were less dramatic but no less unsettling. We had just moved in, and I was alone while my partner handled final arrangements at our previous residence. The stress of moving, combined with poor sleep, created familiar conditions. I woke that morning unable to move, but this time my eyes remained closed. No visual horrors greeted me, no sounds disturbed the silence. Yet the feeling of presence was overwhelming. Something loomed inches from my face, watching, waiting. Through practiced concentration on small movements, I broke free relatively quickly, but the experience left me shaken enough to avoid the bedroom for the rest of the day. What strikes me most about these experiences is how they reduce us to our most primal states. At 13, 23, and 27, my reactions were remarkably similar, calling for protection, fleeing the space where it occurred, and experiencing hours of hypervigilance afterward. The rational adult mind gives way to childlike fear when confronted with something beyond explanation or control. The scientific community offers various explanations for sleep paralysis experiences. The paralysis itself results from a disconnect between mind and body during REM sleep transitions. The hallucinations may be hypnagogic or hypnopompic dream imagery intruding into waking consciousness. The feeling of pressure on the chest likely stems from the paralysis affecting breathing muscles, creating a sensation of restriction that the mind interprets as external force. Cultural interpretations of sleep paralysis vary widely. The old hag appears in Anglo-Saxon folklore, while other cultures describe demons, aliens, or shadow people. The Japanese term kanashibari means bound by metal, reflecting the restraining sensation. These varied interpretations suggest a universal human experience filtered through different cultural lenses. Some researchers propose that sleep paralysis accounts for many supernatural encounters throughout history. Alien abductions, demonic possessions, and ghostly visitations might all be manifestations of this sleep disorder. The consistency of certain elements, the feeling of presence, the inability to move, the overwhelming fear, supports this theory. Yet explaining the mechanism doesn't diminish the terror of the experience. Knowing that your brain is misfiring doesn't make the hallucinations less vivid or the paralysis less frightening. In those moments, academic understanding provides no comfort against the primitive fear of being helpless in the presence of something malevolent. Prevention strategies for sleep paralysis focus on addressing the risk factors. Maintaining regular sleep schedules, managing stress, avoiding sleeping on your back, and treating underlying sleep disorders can all reduce frequency. Some people find that wiggling fingers or toes helps break the paralysis faster, while others recommend trying to cough or move facial muscles. For chronic sufferers, cognitive behavioral therapy can help reduce the anxiety associated with episodes. Learning to recognize the signs of impending sleep paralysis and developing coping strategies can make episodes less traumatic. Some even report learning to transform their frightening hallucinations into more benign visions through practice and mental preparation. Yet for all our scientific understanding and coping mechanisms, sleep paralysis remains one of the most unsettling experiences a person can endure. The combination of physical helplessness and terrifying hallucinations creates a perfect storm of fear that can leave lasting psychological impacts. My personal experiences have left me with a deep respect for the power of these episodes. Even now, years after my last encounter, I occasionally wake with a start, immediately testing my ability to move. The relief of successful movement is profound, a reminder of how much we take our bodily autonomy for granted. For those who've never experienced sleep paralysis, it's difficult to convey the unique terror it induces. Imagine waking in your safest space, your bedroom, only to find yourself trapped in your own body while malevolent forces circle closer. The violation of that sanctuary, even by hallucinations, leaves lasting marks on the psyche. The question remains whether these experiences are purely neurological misfires or windows into something more mysterious. Science offers compelling explanations, but the vividness and consistency of certain elements across cultures and individuals give pause. Perhaps our ancestors were onto something when they populated the darkness with demons and spirits. Whatever the truth, sleep paralysis serves as a reminder of our vulnerability during sleep and the thin line between dreaming and waking. In those terrifying moments between states of consciousness, we glimpse the power of our own minds to create experiences indistinguishable from reality. For anyone experiencing sleep paralysis, know that you're not alone. Millions share this terrifying experience, and while science may not have all the answers, understanding and support exist. The episodes will pass, movement will return, and the morning light will chase away the shadows, until the next time you find yourself caught between sleeping and waking, hoping desperately that tonight won't be the night it returns. The Mother's Nightmare. Let me start with a story that happened many years ago, back in 1981. A young mother woke up in the middle of the night from what she described as the most vivid and terrifying nightmare of her life. In her dream, she had seen a friend of the family die in a horrific car accident. The details were so clear, so specific, that she couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. She woke her husband, frantically telling him about the dream. She described seeing their friend's car flipping over, the sound of metal crushing against metal, and worst of all, the image of decapitation. Her husband tried to calm her down, telling her it was just a bad dream, but she was inconsolable. She begged him not to go back to sleep, insisting that his mother was about to call with terrible news. The husband thought his wife was being irrational. Their friend was a careful driver, and there was no reason to believe anything bad would happen. But his wife was so distressed that he stayed awake with her, trying to comfort her while secretly hoping she would eventually calm down and they could both get some rest. Then, just as she had predicted, the phone rang. It was 3:17 in the morning. The husband's mother was on the other end, her voice shaking with grief and shock. Their friend had been killed in a car accident just outside of town. He had been driving home from a party with his younger brother's girlfriend when he lost control of his convertible Camaro. The car had hit a tree, flipped upside down, and slid down the road for nearly 100 yards. The details matched the mother's dream perfectly. The friend had indeed been decapitated in the crash, just as she had seen in her nightmare. Neither he nor the girl with him had been wearing seatbelts, and both had died instantly. The accident had occurred at almost the exact time the mother had woken up from her prophetic dream. This story raises uncomfortable questions about the nature of consciousness and our connection to events happening around us. How could a woman, sleeping peacefully in her bed, witness an accident happening miles away? Was it purely coincidence, or is there something about the human mind that we don't fully understand? The uncle's passing. Dreams that predict death seem to be more common than we might expect. Another story involves a person who dreamed of their uncle's death months before it actually happened. In the dream, they experienced the first Christmas without their uncle, feeling the empty chair at the family table and the profound sadness that comes with loss. At the time of the dream, the uncle was healthy and active. There was no indication that anything was wrong with him. The dreamer dismissed the experience as just a random nightmare, the kind that sometimes plague us for no apparent reason. But 2 months later, the uncle received a diagnosis of advanced cancer. The disease had already spread throughout his body, and the doctors gave him very little time. The dreamer immediately remembered the Christmas dream and felt a chill run down their spine. They watched as their uncle fought bravely against the disease, but deep down they knew how it would end. They had already seen it in their sleep. 2 years later, the family gathered for Christmas without their beloved uncle. Every detail matched the dream from years before: the empty chair, the subdued conversations, the way the light seemed dimmer in the house. The dreamer sat there experiencing the most intense déjà vu of their life, reliving a moment they had already lived in their dreams. The psychological impact of such experiences cannot be understated. Knowing that someone you love is going to die, but being unable to do anything about it, creates a unique form of grief. The dreamer carried this knowledge alone, afraid to share it with family members who were still hoping for a miracle. The apartment vision. Sometimes these prophetic dreams involve deceased relatives who seem to be preparing us for future losses. One particularly moving account describes a dream where the dreamer visited an apartment and met with their sister's deceased father and their own uncle. The sister's father had died years earlier, but in the dream he appeared healthy and at peace. In the dream, there was an invisible barrier running down the middle of the apartment floor. The dreamer could see and talk to the two men, but couldn't cross over to where they were standing. The sister's father embraced the dreamer and said, "Everything is going to be all right," before the dream ended. Upon waking, the dreamer's first thought was that their uncle was going to die soon. This feeling persisted for weeks, growing stronger each day. Then, about a week before the uncle's actual death, the dreamer had another vision, this time of their grandmother being hospitalized. The dreamer understood instinctively that the grandmother's health would decline when the uncle died, which is exactly what happened. On the night the uncle passed away, the dreamer experienced physical symptoms, a sharp pain in their stomach and uncontrollable crying for no apparent reason. They felt a familiar presence watching them, and the balcony door in their apartment slammed open by itself. The next morning they heard one of their uncle's favorite songs on the radio, and an hour later, they received the call confirming his death. These kinds of experiences suggest that some people may be more sensitive to the spiritual realm, particularly when it comes to family members who are transitioning from life to death. The barrier in the dream seems to represent the boundary between life and death, with the deceased father serving as a guide or messenger. The demonic encounter. Not all sleep paralysis experiences involve family members or prophetic dreams. Some encounters are far more sinister and terrifying. One person described waking up in the middle of the night and sensing a presence to their left. They described it as feeling like an icy blue orb floating about 2 stories up in the air, which was strange because their bed was against the wall. The presence moved through the wall and took on a somewhat human shape as it came around to the bottom of the bed. It crouched down and then jumped onto the person, straddling them. The victim found themselves completely paralyzed, unable to move or speak, while this translucent being attempted to stab them in the chest with what appeared to be a dagger. What made this experience particularly unusual was that the dagger couldn't penetrate the person's chest, as if they were wearing invisible armor. The being became increasingly frustrated and angry, its color changing from blue to burning red. The victim could feel the entity's emotions: surprise, frustration, and growing rage, as if they were telepathically connected. The person began to mentally taunt the being, challenging it to give up since its attacks weren't working. This only made the entity angrier, causing it to stab faster and more desperately. Finally, the victim began to pray, and immediately the being flew away and disappeared. What makes this account particularly compelling is that the person remained conscious throughout the entire experience. They didn't wake up from a dream, they were awake the entire time. After the entity left, they were able to get up and use their laptop to research what had happened to them. The search history was still there the next day, proving that they had been awake during the encounter. The person described feeling the entity's shock and surprise, as if it had expected an easy victory but encountered unexpected resistance. This raises questions about whether some sleep paralysis experiences might involve actual spiritual warfare rather than just hallucinations. The shadow in the snow. Dreams can sometimes transport us to completely different worlds, places that feel absolutely real despite being impossible. One dreamer found themselves in a snow-covered forest in the middle of summer. The woods were dark and quiet, with numerous tracks in the snow, many of them child-sized footprints leading to and from a nearby orphanage. The orphanage was a large two-story building with white walls and soft lights glowing in the windows. The dreamer waited in the tree line, watching, until they saw something that made their blood run cold, a dark puddle that seemed to be made of living shadow. This puddle of darkness began sliding up the side of the building toward one of the windows. Acting on instinct, the dreamer reached into the shadow puddle and grabbed something solid. They pulled out what appeared to be a spine covered in thick black mud. As they pulled harder, the spine grew thicker until an entire shadow figure stood before them. The mud peeled away to reveal a creature with an animal skull for a face, bright blue lights where its eyes should be, and tall black horns. The creature had the lower body of a goat but was covered in swirling, caked on mud instead of fur. Its torso and arms were hidden by the black substance. When the dreamer asked who it was, the creature responded with a voice that sounded like an echo from a distant mountain. The entity seemed more afraid of the dreamer than the dreamer was of it. They sat together in the tree line, and the creature removed its skull mask, revealing a pale, bloodless human face with the same empty blue eyes and embedded horns. The creature explained that it was a demon that fed on life by consuming the small bits that escaped when people dream of dying. The demon called these bits of life folds, and said that each fold represented a year of existence for its kind. The mud covering its body was also made of these folds, and demons communicated and reproduced by mixing their folds together. The dreamer was told that they were about to wake up, and they expressed hope that they would see the creature again. Upon waking, the dreamer could remember every detail of the encounter. They researched the description and found the closest match to be a Japanese baku, a creature that traditionally eats dreams and nightmares. However, the entity they encountered seemed to be something entirely different, something that fed on the essence of life itself. The Midnight Wanderer. Sleepwalking adds another layer of terror to sleep disorders. One account describes a person who attended a Relay for Life event and had been awake for over 48 hours. They dozed off around 2 or 3 in the morning while sitting with friends. The friends later said they saw the person get up, mumble something, and stumble away. They assumed the person was just going to their car to get something. The sleepwalker's next memory was waking up in the parking lot near their car, lying on the ground. They got up and took very small, careful steps back to their car. But then something strange happened. They began waking up in their car repeatedly, each time finding themselves on a different road with the car slowly rolling forward or parked at odd angles. The event was about 20 minutes from their home, but somehow it took them 4 hours to get there. They have no memory of how they got home or what happened during those missing hours. When they finally woke up in their own bed around 6 in the morning, they were covered in blood and scratches, but their car was in perfect condition with no signs of an accident. They asked everyone who had been at the event if they remembered seeing anything unusual, but no one could explain what had happened or how the person had survived whatever they had been through. The physical evidence, the blood and scratches, proved that something had happened, but the complete lack of memory made it impossible to understand what. Sleepwalking can be incredibly dangerous, as people can travel long distances and put themselves in harm's way without any conscious awareness of what they're doing. The fact that this person survived 4 hours of unexplained activity while apparently injured suggests that they were extremely lucky, or perhaps something was protecting them. The time loop. Sometimes sleep paralysis experiences can feel like being trapped in a time loop, reliving the same terrifying moments over and over again. One account describes a person who came home from a stressful day at work in 1989 and decided to relax in a nearby field. This was their usual routine. They would lie down in the grass, take off their shirt and shoes, and let nature help them unwind. On this particular day, they lay down as usual and began to relax. After about 10 minutes, they heard a faint whistle. Extreme drowsiness overcame them and they passed out. But instead of waking up in the field, they found themselves face down on their kitchen table at home, looking out the window at their wife and child in the yard. Every time they tried to lift their head or move, they would become drowsy again and their head would slam back down on the table. Then they would wake up again in the exact same spot in the field where they had first fallen asleep. This cycle repeated over and over, field, table, with the person becoming more panicked each time. They couldn't understand what was happening or how to stop it. The only thing they could focus on was wondering how they were going to continue living if this never ended. They estimated that the loop continued for about 5 to 10 minutes, but time seemed distorted and unreliable. Finally, they woke up in a hospital bed with serious injuries to their neck, head, back, and legs. A nurse told them they had been in a fatal car accident at an intersection while driving home from work. Witnesses thought they had died on impact, but somehow they had survived with life-changing injuries. The person realized that what they had experienced as a time loop was actually their consciousness trying to process the trauma of the accident. Their mind had created this repeating cycle as a way to cope with the sudden, violent disruption to their normal routine. The field represented their intended destination, while the kitchen table represented the harsh reality of their situation. This experience left them with both physical and psychological scars. They struggled with insomnia, nightmares, and difficulty maintaining mental stability. Even therapists seemed disturbed by their account, and the person spent years trying to understand what had happened to them. The shared vision. Sometimes multiple people can have the same supernatural experience, which makes it much harder to dismiss as imagination or hallucination. One account involves 3 Christian friends who were taking a 2-week trip through the United Kingdom. They were staying in a flat in London when one of them had a disturbing dream. In the dream, this person was shaking themselves awake, and their dream self pointed to a dark corner and said, "You need to pray. There's a demon in that corner." Upon waking, they told their husband about the dream but decided not to tell their friend because they didn't want to frighten her. The next morning, their friend came into their room, sat on the bed and said, "Guys, I think we really need to pray. I had this dream where there was a demon in that corner," and she pointed to the exact same corner that had been in the first person's dream. The fact that 2 people had the same dream about the same location suggests that something beyond normal dreaming was occurring. In many spiritual traditions, shared visions are considered to be messages or warnings about real spiritual dangers. The friends' decision to pray together may have been exactly the right response to whatever they had encountered. The accident prediction. Prophetic dreams about accidents seem to be particularly common, perhaps because traumatic events create such strong spiritual energy that sensitive people can pick up on them before they happen. One account describes a dream about a university friend dying in a car accident. The dreamer wasn't particularly close to this person, but the dream was so vivid and disturbing that it stuck with them. The next day, the dreamer encountered their friend on campus. The friend was laughing about how his buddies had lied to him about a trip to a seaside town, leaving him behind so he would be forced to attend an important exam. The friend seemed to be in good spirits, joking about the situation and focusing on his studies. A few minutes later, the friend received a phone call. His friends had been in a car accident on their way to the seaside town, and all of them had died. The dreamer realized that if their friend had gone on the trip as originally planned, he would have been in the car and died along with the others. The lie that had seemed so cruel at the time had actually saved his life. This raises questions about the nature of fate and free will. Did the friends unconsciously sense the danger and create an excuse to keep their buddy safe? Or was the accident always going to happen, but the friend was destined to survive for some reason? The prophetic dream suggests that some part of the universe knew what was going to happen and was trying to prepare the dreamer for the shocking news. The basement encounter. Old houses often seem to be hotspots for supernatural activity, and basements are particularly notorious for paranormal encounters. One account describes a 13-year-old who was living in a 250-year-old house and had fallen asleep in the basement. The basement wasn't a typical scary cellar. It was a comfortable leisure room with couches and a large TV, but the age of the house gave it an eerie atmosphere. The teenager woke up in the middle of the night completely paralyzed, able to move only their eyes. This is classic sleep paralysis, but what happened next was far from typical. Down the hallway toward the back of the house, they saw a figure walking toward them, a middle-aged woman in linen pants and a blouse, her face obscured by shadows. The figure walked slowly and deliberately toward the paralyzed teenager. Then suddenly the person felt hands closing around their throat. They couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't scream, but they were screaming inside their head. The sensation seemed to last for an hour, though it was probably only a few minutes. Finally, the paralysis broke, and the teenager shot up from the couch and sprinted upstairs to their bedroom, too afraid to look back. They never went back to that basement alone until they were an adult, and even then the space continued to make them uncomfortable. The interesting thing about this account is that the figure appeared to be a normal human being rather than a demon or monster. This suggests that the house might have been haunted by a former resident who had died in the basement or had some strong emotional connection to that space. The choking sensation could have been the spirit trying to communicate their own manner of death or simply expressing anger at having their space invaded. The fitness supplement terror. Sometimes sleep paralysis can be triggered or worsened by external factors like medications or supplements. One account describes a person who worked at a supplement store and had purchased a new pre-workout supplement with unapproved ingredients that are now banned. Both the person and a customer friend had experienced night terrors while taking the supplement and had stopped using it about a week apart. The person was living alone in a small apartment when they began experiencing frequent sleep paralysis episodes. In the first episode, they felt the typical heavy chest sensation and inability to move. When they finally opened their eyes, or thought they did, they saw a small boy standing next to their bed. The boy appeared to be dead, with black circles around his eyes and a completely emotionless expression. The person woke up and realized they weren't sure if their eyes had been open or closed during the experience. All of their sleep paralysis episodes had this same quality of uncertainty about whether they were seeing with their physical eyes or some other kind of perception. In another episode, the person was sleeping on their couch when they felt the same presence, this time in their living room. They saw a dark shadow move from one end of the room to the other, and shortly after, they heard a voice saying something from the bathroom that they couldn't make out. The most terrifying experience happened when the person was on a holiday with their family and fiancé. They were staying in an old beachside shack, and during the night, they found themselves paralyzed again. This time, they saw a dark, shadowy cloud above the end of the bed. In their panic, they looked toward their fiancé and heard her whisper, "Help me." The person tried to scream but could only make weak sounds. Their fiancé woke them up, thinking they were having a nightmare. When asked if she was okay, the fiancé said she was fine. The strange part was that she told them she hadn't been facing them while sleeping, so there was no way the person could have seen her face or heard her speak. This experience raises questions about whether sleep paralysis can sometimes involve actual psychic perceptions rather than just hallucinations. The fact that the person could see the room accurately during their episodes, even though they had never visited the location before, suggests that something beyond normal dreaming was occurring. The childhood encounters. Children seem to be particularly susceptible to sleep paralysis and supernatural encounters, perhaps because they haven't yet learned to dismiss such experiences as impossible. One account describes a 9-year-old who was staying at their grandparents' house for Christmas. The child was sleeping on a cot in the basement hallway, which was already an unsettling situation. During the night, the child woke up completely paralyzed and felt something large and heavy breathing on their back. Their father, who believed in the paranormal, later suggested it might have been the ghost of an old family cat named Onyx. This explanation provided some comfort, but the child continued to have experiences in that house. A few months later, the child was staying at the grandparents' house again for a doctor's appointment. This time, they got to sleep in the basement bedroom instead of the hallway cot. Assuming the previous experience had been caused by fear of the dark, they kept a lamp on in the bedroom. Even with the light on, the child woke up paralyzed again. This time, they felt something lie down next to them and begin slowly stroking their back. The sensation was gentle but terrifying, and the child was unable to move or call for help. These experiences seemed to involve a benevolent presence rather than a malevolent one. The stroking motion was comforting rather than threatening, which suggests that the spirit, whether it was the family cat or some other entity, was trying to provide comfort rather than cause harm. However, the paralysis and inability to communicate made even friendly contact terrifying for the child. The life path vision. Sometimes our dreams can show us glimpses of alternate realities or paths our lives might have taken. One particularly powerful account describes a conversation with a medium about a choice the person had made in high school. They had encountered a shady individual who seemed to know all about them and offered them a path that would have led to a life of crime and dangerous activities. The person had turned down the offer and never saw the individual again. Years later, they asked the medium what would have happened if they had chosen to follow this person instead of walking away. The medium's response was chilling: "You would not have lived to see your 27th birthday." This answer stuck with the person, and a few weeks later they had one of the most terrifying dreams of their life. In the dream, they found themselves living the alternate life they had rejected, working as an assassin for a criminal organization. They were given their first assignment, to kill whoever was in a target house. The dream felt different from normal dreams because the person knew what was going to happen before it happened, as if they were reliving something they had already experienced. They walked up to the house and rang the doorbell, feeling heavy and stiff with anxiety. When the door opened, they were greeted by an older man in his 60s who was overjoyed to see them. The man hugged them and invited them inside, where his wife was equally happy about their arrival. The house was filled with warmth and love, and the person realized they were about to destroy all of that. As they looked around the house and interacted with the elderly couple, they began to cry. They couldn't go through with the assignment and collapsed, telling the couple everything, showing them the weapon and explaining that they had been sent to kill them. They also warned the couple that someone was waiting nearby who would come to finish the job when they realized the person had failed. The dream ended with someone knocking on the door, presumably the backup assassin coming to complete the mission. The person woke up crying, their pillows soaked with tears. They were disturbed by how much empathy they had felt for the couple, even though they were complete strangers. When the person returned to the medium and asked who the elderly couple had been, the medium replied without hesitation, "They were your parents." This revelation was devastating. The person realized that the path they had rejected in high school would have ultimately led them to murder their own parents. The dream suggested that the criminal organization would have gradually corrupted them until they were capable of the most unthinkable acts. The person found comfort in knowing that they had made the right choice and that this terrible future was just a possibility that had been avoided. However, the dream served as a powerful reminder of how our choices can have far-reaching consequences that we never could have imagined. The chronic nightmare. Our final account comes from a young person who has been dealing with chronic insomnia and what they call lucid nightmares since childhood. Unlike normal lucid dreams where the dreamer can control the environment, these nightmares allow only limited control while subjecting the person to extremely vivid and realistic experiences. The most disturbing aspect of these nightmares is that physical injuries sustained in the dreams appear on the person's body when they wake up. They've woken up with bruises, marks, and sometimes even bleeding that corresponds to injuries they received in their nightmares. Medical professionals have been unable to explain this phenomenon, dismissing it as psychosomatic while acknowledging that they can't account for the physical evidence. The recurring nightmare always begins in a dense forest where the person wakes up without their glasses but can see perfectly clearly. They hear screaming and then their father's voice calling for them in distress, which is completely out of character for their normally confident and fearless father. Following the voice, they encounter a creature that defies description, about 6 feet tall but walking on 4 legs, white and iguana-like but humanoid. The creature's back is where its stomach should be, and it hunches over like a crab. Most terrifyingly, it has no face, just a blank space where features should be. The creature mimics the voices of people the dreamer knows, but when it realizes it's been discovered, it runs faster than anything the person has ever seen. It screams as it runs, a sound of pure agony that the person can still hear even while awake. The nightmare always ends the same way. The creature catches the dreamer and begins cutting them with human-like nails while screeching. Strange flying creatures about the size of wine glasses emerge from where the creature's face should be and begin consuming the dreamer. As they die in the dream, they wake up sore and covered in what appear to be bug bites and burns. Medical professionals have examined the injuries and confirmed that they're not spider bites or any other type of insect bite they can identify. The person has been largely sleepless for weeks, afraid to close their eyes and return to this nightmare forest. This account is particularly disturbing because it suggests that some people may be naturally sensitive to other dimensions or realities that most of us can't perceive. The physical injuries make it impossible to dismiss the experiences as just dreams, and the consistency of the nightmare suggests that the person is repeatedly visiting the same otherworldly location. I'll try to keep this short, but my sleep paralysis experiences have stretched over my entire 30 years of being alive. There are many details in this story, but I'll try to keep it from dragging on too long. It might sound like a collection of different stories, but I'll attempt to make it flow together. Let me begin by sharing my earliest memories of sleep paralysis. Everything started in my first house. I moved from that house when I was 5 years old, and I remember having these strange episodes for a few years before we left. I must have been around 3 or 4 years old when they began. I have an unusually good long-term memory, so you'd be surprised how much I actually remember from those early years. I vividly remember lying on my back in my old bedroom, feeling as if I were drowning in an invisible ocean. I couldn't move a single muscle or scream for help, and I felt as if I was suffocating under an enormous weight. All I remember seeing in front of me was my bedroom window, but it appeared faded and distant, like looking through foggy glass. This terrifying experience continued throughout my childhood until I moved to my next home. I lived in that second house for more than 18 years. Throughout my time in this home, I remember feeling the same drowning sensation upon waking up. The pattern was always similar. I would be dreaming a random dream, not a scary one, just a plain, ordinary dream about everyday things. Then suddenly, I would slip into some sort of bizarre conscious state where I was aware but couldn't move. During these episodes, I would feel as if someone or something was approaching me slowly. The presence felt real and threatening. I was completely unable to move or scream for help. I would concentrate with every ounce of strength in my mind to shout out for someone to save me. All I was able to produce was a muffled screech that barely escaped into the darkness of the night terror. No one ever came to my rescue during these frightening moments. I felt as if I was being pulled by invisible hands. Then suddenly, I would rapidly return to normal consciousness. Everything would go completely back to normal as if nothing had happened. In those early days, the memories of my sleep paralysis are a little bit fuzzy and unclear. However, in my high school years, the memories became much more vivid and detailed. During high school, I would be dreaming another random dream. Nothing frightening was happening in my dream, but suddenly I would be stricken with overwhelming fear and panic. I would start breathing heavily in my dream, and then as I was being pulled into wakefulness, I felt intense chills going up and down my entire body. It was as if a mythological, terrifying creature was breathing up and down my spine, a breath of winter wind that chilled me to my bones. When I finally woke up, I would spring up in a panic and rush to my family room for comfort. At the age of 23, I moved into what would be my final home. This is where things became even stranger than before. I had obviously never slept in my basement, but I had my treadmill down there. Every single day for years, I would work out in that basement. Though it was creepy and gave me an uneasy feeling, nothing ever stopped me from completing my daily exercise routine. One night, I was sleeping up in my bedroom when something unusual happened. In the beginning stages of waking up, I experienced something I had never felt before. I was rising and floating against the basement wall. Everything appeared fuzzy, as if I were about to pass out. I was still aware of my location, which was the basement in my dream state to be exact. I had that strange prickly-like chill roaming throughout my entire body, making my skin crawl. Eventually, I awakened and found myself back in my room. It was pretty freaky and left me shaken for days. Another instance occurred a few years ago. I had gotten a new cat on my 27th birthday, and he was sleeping peacefully next to me on my bed. I forget exactly what I was doing on my bed, reading a book or something like that. I ended up accidentally falling asleep. The lights were still on, and within my sleep paralysis dream, they remained on just as they were in reality. In my dream, a dark, billowy, floating cloud appeared in the corner of my room, rising up toward the ceiling like smoke from an invisible fire. My cat was staring intently at it, his eyes wide with what looked like fear. I had overwhelming chills penetrating every inch of my body, and I was breathing heavily, trying to wake myself up. When I finally woke up, my cat was lying on his side, fast asleep and completely unbothered. The dark cloud had disappeared without a trace. My breathing slowly returned to normal. I am unable to think of anything significant that happened between that time and my last major occurrence. I want to say it was about 2 years ago. I had everything going well in my life at that time. I was practically on top of the world, feeling successful and happy. But that following fall, everything came crashing down around me. I became stressed out again, and my depression returned with a vengeance. I know that stress and depression are major triggers for sleep paralysis episodes. I had been struggling again for a little while when a few months ago it happened once more. I had started working the third shift at one of my jobs and had gotten home at 6 in the morning. I fell right asleep from exhaustion, but during the early hours of the morning, I slipped into a sleep paralysis state. The figure of a woman was crawling on top of me. I could not make out her facial features clearly, but she had long, dark hair like mine, and she resembled either me or my sister. She was whispering rapidly, just an inch away from my face. Her whispers were so fast and urgent that I could not make out what she was saying. I had that terrible sensation of prickles up and down my entire body. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, I woke up. I believe that was the last instance, and I'm hoping it never happens again. So now I try to avoid sleeping on my back at all costs. I hope that no one else has to go through what I went through. Let me share another perspective on this phenomenon. I'll begin by letting you know that sleep paralysis is not and never has been a recurring issue for me personally. The two instances I've experienced happened once in grade school and recently as an adult reaching my 30s. I can't remember my exact age during the first incident, but I think it's safe to say I was between 10 and 12 years old at the time. It was the day before Valentine's Day and I was very sick with a high fever. I was upset that I would be missing out on my school's festivities and sweets the following day. I was sent to bed early, feeling terribly ill. As I dozed off that night, I considered that this flu might have contributed to my experience. I have thought about the possibility of it being some sort of fever-induced delirium, but some details that followed have made me not entirely positive that this was the case. I must have awoken between midnight and 3 o'clock in the morning. I was lying on my side, facing the wall that my bed was pressed up against. I awoke with a pressing feeling of a presence in my room and assumed it was my mother checking in on me, as my fever was pretty bad. I called out to her softly and was met with complete silence. At this point, I knew that whoever or whatever was in my room was definitely not my mother. Fear took over my rational thinking. It wasn't that I couldn't move, I was simply too scared to try. I did manage to roll onto my back and kept my eyes locked firmly on the ceiling. I did not want to look at whatever was in my room with me. It was at this time that I began to feel an unexpected sense of peace, and my dread slowly dissipated. I began to feel strangely comfortable with the presence. As soon as my senses calmed, I will never forget what I saw next. A hand came into view, slowly cupping over my brow. It was not a human hand. It was unusually long, with digits that seemed to stretch forever. The hand was slender, graceful, and undeniably creepy. It had a luminescence to it like I have never seen before or since. As soon as it made contact with my forehead, I was out cold. The next morning, I awoke in my bed completely healthy. No fever, no trace of my previously dripping nose and nasty cough. I felt a strange sensation of well-being that I had never experienced before. I went immediately to my mother's room and asked her if she had been in my room during the night. Confused, she informed me that she had not and commented on my strange behavior. I told her what I could remember from the previous night's experience. It was brought up from time to time over the years as a very strange occurrence. My mother even went as far as to call it an angel. Now on to the present. I feel it's relevant to mention that I have seen multiple UFOs throughout my life. It may also be worth saying that I live in a very rural state where the night sky is clear. I have seen UFOs alone, in groups, and with people who can verify their trajectory. So I know I am not imagining things. I've had daytime and nighttime sightings. Aliens and UFOs do not cross my mind often, as my life now is quite busy with normal everyday concerns. About 1 month ago, I had another experience that shook me up badly and made me recall the encounter I had as a child. I woke around midnight or 3 o'clock in the morning to a distinct feeling of a presence in my room. I thought immediately that we had experienced a break-in and the intruder was in my room. I was on my back and filled with so much terror that I could not move a muscle. I have a night light adjacent to my bed that I share with my fiancé. He was sleeping on the side closest to where I assumed this thing was standing. I was petrified and too scared to look at his side of the bed. Instead, I saw the shadow of this thing cast on the wall right beside me. It had to have been no taller than 4 feet from what I could tell from the shadow. It was slender with a large, oval-shaped head. Again, I could not bring myself to look directly at it. It has bothered me since that during these two experiences, I could never bring myself to look at the entity. Something inside of me said it would be catastrophic if I saw it directly. Instead of feeling calm like the first time, I felt like my life was in immediate danger. I did not get the good feelings that I had with my previous encounter. I was out of my mind with fear and felt that I was unable to scream or move anything except for my fingers. It raised its hands up and I instantly recognized them. Even by just the shadow, I knew it was the same sort of hand that I saw in my room over 10 years ago. At this point, I could feel my fingers pinching my fiancé's thigh desperately, but he was not waking up. This fueled my panic even more. I was so scared that I actually fainted from fear. I can't recall any dreams or details from there. The next night, I laid in bed with the night light on and lights off. I asked my fiancé to stand on his knees by the bed. His shadow mimicked the exact projection and placement of whatever was blocking the light the previous night. I have been deeply troubled by this ever since and have had no other occasions of sleep paralysis in my entire life. So is this just some freak brain chemistry hiccup? A lucid nightmare? Or actually an encounter with an interdimensional or extraterrestrial being? I still don't have answers. Here's another account that started about 3 years ago. I was talking to this girl for a little while. Her name was Natalie. She lived in an older house and had the entire basement to herself. I remember her saying things like how her house was haunted. I didn't really believe her until this one particular night. Me and my friend Nick were spending the night at her house. I remember my friend lying down on the couch at around 9:30 p.m. He was just staring blankly at the wall. I didn't think anything was wrong at first. I thought he was just messing around or lost in thought. I started calling his name. Nick? Nick? Nothing. I couldn't get any response from him whatsoever. Meanwhile, I was across the room and Natalie was sitting on her bed. After about a minute of him just staring blankly at the wall, he suddenly jumps off the couch saying, "I don't mess with that. I don't mess with that." He was freaking out completely and Natalie started laughing at him. It didn't really dawn on me until later that I think she knew exactly what was happening. Anyways, I started laughing too, thinking it was just a joke or prank they were playing. About 5 minutes passed and he finally calmed down and sat back down on the couch. This is where things became really creepy and interesting. She had a screen door in her room that opened directly outside. I specifically remember that as soon as I took 2 steps out of her room to go outside, every single light in her room, including the outlets, all blew out simultaneously. It was pitch black in an instant. It became really creepy for a second. We tried everything to get the lights working again, and the only thing in her room that would work was the lamp that was next to the couch, right next to Nick's head. Anyways, this was all kind of new to me. I didn't really know what to think about the situation. Then I remember things getting weird in the room. Natalie was getting super agitated over the littlest things and wouldn't let me sleep in her bed. So I was like, whatever, I'll just sleep on the floor at the foot of her bed. I remember I just could not fall asleep that night, no matter how hard I tried. I was lying there while everyone else was asleep when I had a sleep paralysis type feeling. I couldn't move or do anything. I remember this had happened to me once when I was young and all I could think to do was pray. I started saying the Our Father prayer in my head. When I was about halfway through it, the paralysis stopped and I tried to go back to sleep. About 30 seconds passed and it hit me once again. I couldn't move. This is giving me chills just remembering this. So I started praying again and again. Halfway through the prayer it stopped. At this point I was like, whatever, it's gone. Until about 30 seconds passed once more. But this time was much more frightening than before. I remember it felt as if someone had plugged me into an electrical outlet. I was being shocked throughout my whole body. My body was kind of shaking and whatever it was seemed to be holding me down hard. I remember trying to move my arms as hard as I could to rip the blanket off Nick to wake him up and help me. But in my head I kept saying the Our Father prayer, and it left halfway through again. At this point I was completely freaking out. I was literally scared for months after that experience. I slept in the same room as my mom for a month or so. It took me a while to kind of make sense of what happened that night. But I think some entity or demon or something, I don't know exactly what, tried messing with my friend Nick. And when I laughed and taunted it, it had targeted me instead. The story doesn't end there though. This happened about 2 years ago when I moved into my new house, which I still live in today. I remember my aunt was visiting and it was late at night, around 2 a.m. I was just chilling, playing video games, doing my thing when I heard this weird sound on my left. Or maybe it was my right. I had my gaming headset on, so I just ignored it at first and kept on playing. When I thought I heard the same sound a second time from behind me on my bed, I took my headset off and waited. And I heard it once again. To find out what it was, I sat there for like 2 minutes just waiting and listening. When I heard the sound right next to me, all I could make out was this strange whisper. It was weird and creeped me out completely. So I ran into my mom's room and told her something was making sounds in my room. She was like, "Oh, it's probably just the sprinkler system or something." She went outside to go look. I remember I walked back into the hall to my room and stood there waiting for my mom to come back inside. When I literally heard the loudest whisper in my ear, I ran outside of my house crying and freaking out. My mom thought I was going crazy. I remember hearing the voice another time while I was trying to sleep, and I just kept telling it to go away. I haven't had any crazy stuff happen since then, even though I do get sleep paralysis sometimes. My most recent experience was feeling the presence of a woman in my room, and I couldn't move whatsoever. I don't know. All this stuff is just really creepy to me. I figured I would try to tell somebody about it and share my experience. Let me share my experiences as well. I'm 13 years old, a girl, and I want to share my experiences with sleep paralysis, even if they come out in a messy way. The first time I had sleep paralysis, it was just a normal day. I sleep with my mom next to me because there's no other room available, so we share one. I fell asleep on my left side. I woke up and rolled onto my right side. I was on my stomach looking at the plushies nearby. I could move, I could see everything clearly. I checked my phone, which happened to be next to me, and it was about 3 a.m. But then I started hearing how one of my plushies said that it had feelings, and if I didn't pick it up by the count of 3, something bad would happen. I acted stubborn and waited for it to count. I was even giggling a little bit at how silly it seemed. Then the counting stopped. 1 second after the count ended, I felt intense chills on my back. I couldn't move, or maybe I was just not ready to turn my head. I felt like somebody was trying to pull my covers off me. I turned around and I didn't see anything. Well, I was kind of disappointed and relieved at the same time. I checked my side to see if there was really a fallen plushie. No, there wasn't. I fell asleep again. I told this to my friend at school, but they said I was just sleeping. But I remember opening my eyes clearly. I know most people think it might be something close to sleepwalking or that I'm 13 years old and just a baby. I'm not sleeping with the plushies, they are on a shelf next to me. The second experience was different. I was reading a comment about Slender Man being possessed by a demon human. I had never heard that theory before, so I checked the wiki to find something about it. I'm not a huge fan of any creepypastas. I know only the main things about them. So I checked it and I didn't find anything about that specific theory. I only found photos, powers, contest stories, elementary school references, and a group with 00 at the end. I searched a little bit about the elementary school in the group. There wasn't anything substantial. My brother started making noise in the kitchen where I was because he was hungry. Of course, as a sister and brother do, we started fighting like kids. He put mayo all over my cheek as a prank. I tried to wash it off and started throwing water at him in retaliation. He ran to the toilet, and as revenge, I kicked open the door. The door opened wildly. He wasn't naked or anything, he had his clothes on. I backed away laughing. He slapped me and said he only wanted to use the bathroom in peace. I started laughing like crazy. His face was hilarious. After a few minutes, my anger started to build because I don't like being hit, no matter who it is. So I broke a stick out of frustration. I laid on my bed and curled up like a ball on the left side of the bed. People might ask why I keep mentioning the left side every single time. Well, most people have nightmares when they sleep on their left side. That's what I've noticed. I fell asleep and then the dreams came to me. I was dreaming that I was outside with a girl. I don't remember who she was. We were going into some cave. She was going upstairs into this cave and I was a few meters behind her. I turned my head and I saw Slender Man standing behind a tree. Then I looked for a shadow to see if I was imagining things. So I looked again at him. Then a picture of Slender Man popped up in my vision. I started hearing static noises like from an old TV. I tried to open my eyes. I felt that my eyes could move beneath my eyelids, but I couldn't open them. I was still hearing the static noises. I was still seeing the picture burned into my vision. I started feeling my body, but it was like it was frozen solid. I tried to move it, but something wouldn't let me. My body was completely paralyzed. I tried my hardest to shake myself awake. Finally, I was able to open my eyes. My heart was beating like crazy. I felt like I couldn't breathe properly. I told myself that was insane. I didn't say anything to my family or friends. I was just shaking and sweating for 2 hours before I finally calmed down. I continued trying to live my life normally. But because of all this craziness, I now try to sleep on my right side and try not to sleep on my stomach or on my back. I'm sure with time I will get over it. I don't really feel scared anymore, but I feel excited in a strange way. I know I better not mess with the other world, though. Here's another perspective from someone who works as a nanny. Ever since I started working for a new family, I've been getting nightmares or visits. Not that it helps, but their house is actually haunted, so the family and young children have told me. Anyways, I will share the most recent sleep paralysis or whatever it is that I have had last month. I get one every month for a year now, and this one to me was the worst. After falling asleep one evening, my mother was coming down for a visit. It It was about 9 p.m. Sleep overpowered me and I couldn't wait up anymore with my father. Every Friday, I lock my room door as my dad likes to wake me up to go grocery shopping early Saturday mornings, and I want to sleep in. I fell asleep with my music earphones still in my ears. When I awoke from whatever this really was, I had been asleep only for about 2 hours. This is what I dreamt. My earphones started to bother me in my sleep as I turned from side to side. So I removed the plug from my right ear first and then my left ear. But as soon as I took the left plug out, it was back in my ear again. Again and again as I removed that same plug, it kept returning. That went on for quite some time. When it finally stayed out, I heard scratches at my door. Now, I have a cat who sometimes wants in my room to sleep with me, but he usually tugs at the door at the bottom with his paw. I've never had him scratch to come in. It sounded more like a dog wanting to come in desperately. I started screaming, "No! Stop it, Lucas!" I said no repeatedly. It didn't work. Screaming only his name in a certain pitch always works to make him stop. But even when I screamed his name in that tone, the scratches didn't stop. It made me angry. I got up, opened the door and said, "No," firmly. But as I looked down and around, my cat was nowhere in sight. Confused, I decided to use the washroom. But I only washed my face. Thinking to hell with my room, I'll sleep with my mom. I made my way to the guest room. I crawled into bed and my mom said, "Hi, Laura." Then I felt something jump on the bed, which was my cat. I asked my mother if he had been there the whole time. She replied that he had slept with her the whole night so far. I thought I had snapped awake from my dream as I found myself back in my bed in my room. I could see the sunlight shining in my room. I turned my face to the wall. My bed happens to be in the corner. I heard the sound of someone approaching my bedside. Thinking it was my dad wanting to go shopping, I closed my eyes and pretended to really be asleep. It seemed like he sat near my pillow but didn't do anything. He didn't try to wake me up. Confused, I rolled over to look. This is the part where I really woke up and it was dark in my room. No sunlight, nothing but darkness. Lying on my back, I felt something on top of me. I couldn't move and my eyes wouldn't move either. I watch a lot of demon and angel movies, so my mind was thinking maybe it was a demon. I was scared beyond belief. I started to pray, although the words wouldn't come out properly. My teeth were chattering. Our Father prayer in French was impossible to say. I was able to eventually speak fully after a couple of tries and kept praying. I only know prayers in French. After repeating both prayers 3 times, I was finally able to move. I took that chance to grab my phone and my rosary. Still praying, I searched for the Archangel Michael prayer. After that, the atmosphere in the room changed completely and I was okay. I've had sleep paralysis as a teenager and young adult. It was an every night occurrence for most of my teen years at least, but I never told anyone about it. I became so stressed out that I began to lose weight. I became depressed because my body could not get the necessary sleep that I needed. I began to fear sleeping itself. In my sleep paralysis state, I encountered many entities, but I will just call them demons because I was actually told by one entity that it was indeed a demon. I was not raised in church and my family was definitely not religious. But I knew there was some sort of spiritual conflict happening. Growing up, I mainly only dealt with one demon. It was not violent but very sexual in nature. It would touch me inappropriately while I was paralyzed. I can remember small details like when it got on the bed would sink down under its weight. I could feel it moving close. It normally moved up from behind me as I sleep on my side and touched me in ways I didn't want. Fast forward, I joined the military and moved to Virginia. I had not experienced sleep paralysis for many years. This is where things got pretty weird. I called my mom one day and she put me on hold. When she got back on the phone, she didn't sound like herself at all. I asked her what was wrong and she said she hadn't been feeling good. I asked her why. She hesitated to tell me at first, so I just kept asking her questions. She went on, "I've been having these nightmares. I wake up and it's like I'm still in the bed but I can't move or scream. Then this thing starts getting on the bed and it's touching me and feeling on me. I don't know if I'm going crazy or what." I immediately told her that I knew what it was and told her about my experiences with it. For some reason her phone kept hanging up on me and she had to keep calling me back. So I was obviously freaking out at this point. My mom had sleep paralysis for a few months and then it stopped. But I began having it again in Virginia. It was really scary to have it in Virginia because I thought this would only bother me in Pennsylvania. It was the same one from Pennsylvania. I could always tell. Things started getting pretty strange because two of my friends who slept over at my house experienced it as well. They were afraid to sleep over at my house. One was afraid to sleep alone even at her own house because she said she had never experienced such a realistic nightmare. I also experienced something else strange in Virginia. Sleeping over at a friend's house, I experienced something very terrifying. I was sleeping in the bed of a male friend. I'm female, by the way. He's just a friend of mine, but he has told me in the past that he had feelings for me. Anyhow, I went into sleep paralysis at his house and experienced a demon that I had never encountered before. It was so strong it literally was pulling me off the bed. It had its claws digging into my body and was dragging me toward the edge of the bed. I screamed out for Jesus to help me and I immediately woke up. I was so afraid that I got up and opened all the blinds in his room to let the outside light in. I then began praying out of fear. Immediately after praying, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. My friend had woken up screaming. Apparently, his leg had fallen between the bed and the wall as I was praying. So yeah, that was pretty freaky as well. This experience was one of the first where I began to experience demons that were not, I guess, specifically attached to me. I moved to Hopewell with my roommate, and I experienced many different demons in that place. I've experienced 3 demons having a conversation right in front of me as if they didn't even see me there. I could even tell the difference in their voices. Each had a distinct way of speaking. I began going to church, a crazy experience and a long story, but I was eventually saved. After I began reading the Bible and believing in Jesus, I learned 2 things that were very interesting about my sleep paralysis experiences. When I showed no fear and instead showed anger, I was able to free myself from being paralyzed. After freeing myself, if I grabbed the demon and said, "I bind you in the name of Jesus Christ," I would immediately and abruptly wake up. I've run into a few that didn't let me out of sleep paralysis right after saying it, so I would recite it even more forcefully. I would say, "I bind you in the name of Jesus. I bind you, burn you, destroy you, and send you straight to the pits of hell for all eternity." I promise you, you can sense their fear. Their fear either comes from Jesus' name or your unwillingness to be fearful of them. Either way, you'll wake up abruptly. I don't know if me being saved or believing has anything to do with them being afraid of me, but my instincts tell me that it does. I don't know if these demons have given up on me or what, but I have not experienced sleep paralysis for some years now. I truly hope this helps someone in some way, shape, or form. Other than an interest in UFOs and the possibility of ESP as a teenager, I never took interest in the occult. I never had an encounter with the supernatural before what I'm about to describe. However, in 2004 to 2005, I and my best friend became involved in ministering to someone who was deeply involved in the occult. A few weeks into helping this person, I had my first encounter with sleep paralysis. I woke at about 3 in the morning to a feeling of stark terror and the sense of a malevolent darkness filling the room. I could not move or speak and I could barely breathe. I felt as if an unseen python were squeezing the life from me. While I could not speak out loud, I could pray in my mind, and I did so, asking God to rescue me from whatever had come into my room. I repeatedly rebuked the presence in the name of Yeshua. Finally, I don't know how long it took as time itself seemed to slow, I was exhausted and fell back to sleep. A few weeks later, I woke again to the same presence and the same paralysis. This time I reacted more quickly and was able to force the words, "In the name of Yeshua, I rebuke you. Get out," from my lips, but just barely. This time the encounter lasted only a few minutes. This happened twice more over the next couple of months. The last 2 times I had woken up, instantly felt the presence, sat right up in bed and rebuked its presence. The encounter stopped before it could even start. These encounters all happened at about 3 o'clock in the morning. Some years later, I had another encounter, again connected to ministering to someone deep in the occult. God had finally given me a breakthrough where this person, who previously would get incredibly angry at the mere mention of him, was now able to have conversations. I was able to share the love of the Messiah with him. In the process, he told me that when he was young, he was terrified by demonic spirits. This happened until another spirit, which he described as looking like the negative of a silhouette, appeared to him and offered to be his protector. After that, the other demons had left him alone. That night, I dreamt of an old mentor of mine that I hadn't seen in a while. In my dream, I saw him surrounded by an aura of light. Thinking this must be the Holy Spirit, I went forward to greet him. I woke up to the same sense of fear, the same paralysis, and the same feeling of a powerful presence in the room that I had experienced years before. but with a difference, I could actually see something. Flickering in and out of my vision, like the strobe effect you might see in some horror movies, was something that looked like the negative image of a silhouette of a man. This time I got angry instead of fearful and somehow managed to bolt upright in my bed. I rebuked it and commanded it to cease its attack in the name of Yeshua. As I reached out with my hand, I felt as if my hand had closed around something, and I squeezed as hard as I could. I couldn't bring my fingers any closer together. Mindful of what Yeshua had said about the spirit which returns to a person bringing along its friends, I prayed to God for direction. I felt him telling me to send it to him. I commanded it to go to the throne of God for judgment, again in his name. It left, and I could hear a subaudible cursing as it went. I would later find articles about sleep paralysis that indicated it was simply a medical condition caused by the body not waking up correctly. I'm a lifelong insomniac and a very light sleeper. I sometimes wake up several times a night due to some noise or movement stirring me. You would think that if this were simply a product of normal brain activity, I would have experienced it my whole life. And yet the 2 periods in my life in which I did experience sleep paralysis happened to be the 2 periods in which I was ministering to someone deep in the occult. That, and the fact that I was able to stop the attacks through the name of Yeshua, convinces me that what I experienced was not merely a neurological phenomenon, but something far more sinister. After that final encounter, I expected there might be more, but years passed without incident. I continued my ministry work, but perhaps with a deeper understanding of the spiritual warfare that could accompany it. I began to pray more fervently before engaging with those involved in dark practices, asking for God's protection not just for them, but for myself and my family. It wasn't until 2012 that I had another significant experience, though this one was quite different. I was asked to counsel a young woman who had been involved in what she described as white magic, healing crystals, tarot readings, and communication with what she believed were benevolent spirits. She seemed sincere in her desire to turn away from these practices, but she was experiencing what she called spiritual attacks whenever she tried to pray or read scripture. During one of our sessions, she mentioned that she kept having the same recurring dream. A figure that looked like a photographic negative of a person would appear in her bedroom, always accompanied by a sense of crushing despair. When she described this entity, my blood ran cold. It sounded identical to what I had seen years earlier. I shared my own experiences with her, and we spent considerable time in prayer together. I taught her the same methods of spiritual warfare that had worked for me, the power of rebuking these entities in the name of Yeshua, the importance of not showing fear, and the authority that believers have been given over such forces. That night, I found myself lying awake, wondering if my involvement in her situation might trigger another encounter. I had learned to recognize the signs, the unusual stillness in the air, the way shadows seemed to deepen in the corners of the room, and that peculiar feeling of being watched. Around 2:30 a.m. I felt it beginning. But this time I was ready. Before the paralysis could fully set in, I was already praying, already preparing for battle. When the familiar presence filled the room, I didn't wait for it to gain strength. I immediately began to rebuke it, commanding it to leave in the name of Yeshua. The encounter lasted perhaps 30 seconds before the oppressive atmosphere lifted and peace returned to the room. The young woman later told me that same night had been a turning point for her. She had experienced her usual nightmare, but when the dark figure appeared, she had remembered our conversation and rebuked it as I had taught her. She said it had fled immediately, and she hadn't had the dream since. These experiences have fundamentally changed how I approach ministry to those involved in occult practices. I now understand that there are real spiritual forces at work, and that engaging with the darkness in someone's life can sometimes invite that darkness to respond. But I also know that we are not defenseless against such forces, and that the name of Yeshua carries an authority that these entities cannot withstand. The medical explanations for sleep paralysis may account for some cases, but I remain convinced that what I experienced was something else entirely, a reminder that our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual forces of wickedness in heavenly places. The man in the hallway. I had never believed in sleep paralysis before it happened to me. I used to laugh it off when people on the internet described shadow people sitting on their chests or whispering in their ears. It always sounded too theatrical, too staged. I figured it was just people dreaming while half awake. But that changed last winter, when I moved into my new apartment. It was a small one-bedroom place on the second floor of a creaky old building. The rent was cheap and the landlord didn't ask too many questions. I needed that. I had just lost my job and was looking for any way to keep my head above water. When I moved in, the place felt empty, stale, like no one had lived there in a long time. Dust still clung to the baseboards. The bedroom window refused to open. The heater rattled like it was full of bones. But I didn't care. I told myself I could fix it up. I could deal with the cold, the isolation, the quiet. The first night was uneventful. I barely unpacked, too tired to care. I tossed a mattress on the floor, covered it with a thin blanket, and went straight to sleep. But around 3 a.m., I jolted awake for no clear reason. I wasn't cold, I wasn't in pain, but my heart was pounding. It was like my body knew something I didn't. That was the first time I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, dragging footsteps just outside my bedroom door. I froze, listening. My apartment was small. There was no way someone could be walking around without me seeing them. And I had locked the door. I always locked the door. The steps stopped right outside my room. I stared at the door, holding my breath. Silence. Then nothing. I must have sat there for 10 minutes before I convinced myself it was the pipes or the neighbors upstairs. But the feeling stayed with me like static under my skin. The second night, it happened again. I woke up at exactly 3:03 a.m. This time I couldn't move. I was completely paralyzed. My eyes were open. I could see the cracked ceiling and the corner of the door frame, but I couldn't twitch a finger or turn my head. I couldn't even blink. Panic rushed in like a flood. I tried to scream, but my throat felt filled with concrete. Then the footsteps came. Soft, deliberate. From the hallway. From the kitchen. Then closer, into the bedroom. I couldn't see anyone, but I could feel him. He stood just outside the edge of my vision, somewhere to the left. My body screamed at me to look, to move, to do anything, but I was frozen. A hot pressure built in my chest, like something was sitting on me, breathing in sync with me. Not heavy, just there, present. Then I heard a voice. No, not a voice exactly. It was like breathing turned into words. Harsh, rattling. I see you. I swear to God, the air shifted around me when it said that. Like the whole room leaned in to listen. Then, like a switch, I could move again. I sat up so fast I almost blacked out. I turned the light on, expecting to see someone crouched at the foot of my bed. But the room was empty. The door was closed. My apartment was silent. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. By the fourth night, I was terrified to even lie down. I tried drinking until I passed out. It didn't work. The paralysis came anyway. This time, I woke up with my eyes locked on the door and I saw him. Not just a shadow. A man. Tall. Barely visible against the dark. But I could make out the shape of him. Long arms, too long. A head tilted slightly, like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. And his hands? His fingers were splayed like spider legs, twitching softly. He didn't move. He just stood in the doorway, watching. I wanted to scream, but my lungs weren't working. I couldn't even breathe properly. Every time I inhaled, it felt like he was breathing it back out. Like we were sharing the same breath. Then I noticed something worse. He was getting closer. Not walking, just flickering. Like every time I blinked, even though I didn't think I was blinking, he was closer. First at the door, then halfway to my bed, then beside me, and then he bent down. He didn't touch me. He leaned in so close that I could feel his breath on my cheek. It was cold, wet, like fog off a grave. Then he whispered something I'll never forget. You let me in. When I woke up, I was screaming. That morning, I checked every inch of the apartment. I thought maybe someone had broken in, maybe I was losing my mind. I even considered going to a doctor, but what would I say? I keep seeing a man made of shadows whispering in my ear every night. They'd commit me. I started staying awake at night, drinking coffee until sunrise. The sleep deprivation made everything worse. I started seeing him when I was awake, at the edge of mirrors, in the black static of my TV when it was off. Once I walked past a window and saw him standing in the hallway, outside my apartment, facing the door. Just standing there, like he was waiting for me to fall asleep again. I caved on the 8th night. I was so exhausted I could barely keep my eyes open. I remember lying on the mattress, eyes heavy, brain buzzing, promising myself I'd only nap for a minute. I woke up to silence. Not just quiet, dead silence. No heater rattling, no street noise, no wind. Just the thick, muffled void. I was paralyzed again. This time he was sitting on my chest. I couldn't see his face. It was like looking into a bottomless pit. But I felt his weight, heavy and wrong, like he was made of something denser than flesh. He didn't speak this time. He just stared at me. Then I felt his hand close around my throat. My heart thudded, slow and panicked. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I couldn't even blink. All I could do was look into that face-shaped nothingness and feel myself slipping away. Then he leaned closer and his head split open, right down the center, like a mouth opening where a mouth shouldn't be. And something inside, something glowing, twitching, alive, reached out toward my face. That's when I broke free. I bolted upright, gasping for air, tears running down my face. My throat burned. My chest hurt. But I was alive. The room was cold and dim, the shadows still long and deep, but the man was gone. Or so I thought. I tried to leave that morning. I packed a bag, grabbed my keys, and ran for the door. But when I turned the knob, it wouldn't budge. Not stuck. Not locked. Just unmoving, like it was part of the wall. I tried the windows. Same thing. They wouldn't open. I smashed one with a lamp, but instead of shattering, it rippled like I'd hit water. That was 2 days ago. Time doesn't work right anymore. The clock hasn't moved since I noticed the man in the hallway. It always says 3:03 a.m. I don't know if I'm awake or dreaming now. I don't know if I ever really left that moment when he whispered, "You let me in." Because he was right. That first night when I thought I heard footsteps, I got up. I opened the door to the hallway. I looked outside, and I saw him. I stared too long. I didn't shut the door. I let him see me. I let him in. Now, even when I sleep with the lights on, I see him. I don't feel safe anywhere in the room. The walls shift when I'm not looking. The corners seem deeper. Sometimes I hear him behind me when I'm looking in the mirror. He's always watching, waiting for me to fall asleep again. Because sleep is the only time he gets stronger, the only time he gets closer. And the last time he visited me, he didn't come alone. There were others, dozens, maybe hundreds, all standing behind him, faces hidden in the dark, all with the same long arms, the same twitching fingers, the same splitting mouths. I think they're waiting for me to break, and I'm close. I don't know how much longer I can fight it. I haven't slept in days, and every time I blink, I see him standing in the hallway again. Closer. Soon I won't wake up screaming. Soon I won't wake up at all. Don't look at her. I hadn't had a full night's sleep in over a month. Not since I moved into the house on Willow Lane. It was a charming 2-story rental just outside the city, a good deal for what it was. A wraparound porch, old wooden floors, even a fireplace. Quiet neighborhood. Friendly neighbors. Too good to be true. And of course it was. The first time it happened, I thought it was just a nightmare. I had gone to bed early that night, completely exhausted from work and unpacking boxes. Around 2:45 a.m., I woke up unable to move. Eyes wide open, body frozen stiff, limbs useless. I was on my back, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember how to breathe. It felt like something heavy was sitting on my chest, not crushing me exactly, but keeping me from drawing a full breath. I tried to call out, but nothing came out. Not even a gasp. Then I noticed the shape. At first, it was just a vague silhouette in the far corner of the bedroom. A darker patch of black in the already dark room. But then it began to move, jerking forward in twitchy, unnatural motions. It stopped near the edge of the bed. I could feel it looking at me. I couldn't move my eyes, but I knew. Like the way you just know when someone is behind you, even if you can't hear them. Then it bent down and whispered, "Don't look at her." The voice wasn't angry. It wasn't threatening. It was soft, breathy, almost like a secret. But it froze the blood in my veins. And just like that, I could move again. I sat up and turned on every light in the house. The shape was gone. The room was quiet again. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Over the next few days, things got stranger. I started hearing knocks on the walls around 3 a.m., slow, deliberate, coming from inside the house. Sometimes it sounded like footsteps above the ceiling, even though the attic was empty. Once I heard soft crying. A woman's voice, distant and muffled, sobbing from somewhere behind the closet wall. Each time I investigated, there was nothing there. No signs of anyone, no explanation. I even checked with my neighbors. None of them heard a thing. Then the paralysis came back. Every few nights, like clockwork, I would wake up frozen, unable to scream, unable to move. And every time that same whisper would return. "Don't look at her. The voice began to feel familiar, like someone I used to know. Not just a ghostly warning, it sounded like it cared. Like it was trying to protect me. I should have listened. 2 weeks after moving in, I made the mistake that changed everything. It was raining hard that night. I had just crawled into bed and dozed off despite the unease that had become my new normal. I don't know how long I slept before I woke up in paralysis again. But this time the air was different. Heavier. Thicker. Like the whole house was holding its breath. And then I heard it. The dragging sound. Long nails, maybe? Or something rough sliding across the floorboards. It came from behind me. Whatever it was in the room now. I couldn't see it. My eyes were stuck facing the ceiling, but I could feel it moving closer. Then, from the foot of the bed, I heard the whisper. Don't look at her. Only this time it was frantic. Urgent. Desperate. I didn't listen. I strained my eyes downward, forcing every bit of strength in my neck to shift my gaze just a few inches toward the bottom of the bed. And I saw her. She was crawling across the floor, upside down. Back arched in the wrong direction. Arms twisted. Head hanging backwards so her face stared straight up at me, even as her limbs moved her forward like a spider. Her long black hair clung to her pale face. Her eyes were wide and milky like they had no pupils. But she was smiling. A wide, toothy grin that stretched all the way to her ears. She stopped at the edge of the bed, then climbed up, her broken limbs creaking with each movement. And when her face was just inches from mine, her mouth opened wider than it should have. Far wider. She didn't scream. She just breathed long, rattling breaths that smelled like soil and blood. And then I passed out. I woke up at noon the next day, soaked in sweat. My throat was sore like I'd been screaming all night. I ran to the mirror and saw 4 long scratches running across my chest. Deep enough to sting. Too clean to be from me. I left the house that afternoon. I couldn't do it anymore. I checked into a motel 2 towns over and tried to pretend none of it had happened. But the damage was done. The thing followed me. The paralysis came back that very night in the motel. This time, I woke up staring at the motel room's ceiling fan as it spun silently above me. But there was something wrong with it. It wasn't spinning in sync. It glitched, like a video buffering, starting and stopping at odd intervals. Then it stopped completely. And the woman dropped down from it. From the ceiling. She landed on me with a thud, her body ice cold, her limbs locking around me. I couldn't breathe. Her face was right above mine, smiling again, her mouth twitching at the corners. And then she spoke. You looked at me. Her voice wasn't just in my ears. It was inside my head, echoing off every thought, every memory. Her smile widened, and her jaw began to crack open like it was unhinging, like she was about to swallow me whole. I don't remember how long I screamed when I finally came to, but I remember the motel manager knocking on the door and asking if I needed an ambulance. I almost said yes. I've moved 3 times since then. Different cities, different apartments. I even changed jobs. But it doesn't matter. No matter where I go, she finds me. She doesn't come every night. That would be almost easier. No, she waits until I start to feel safe. Until I let my guard down. And then she comes crawling back. The man's voice doesn't return anymore. That whisper, don't look at her, I haven't heard it since the motel. I think he was trying to protect me from her. Maybe he used to live in the house too. Maybe he broke the same rule I did. Looked at her. Let her in. Maybe his soul is trapped, forced to warn others before it's too late. Maybe he failed just like I did. The worst part? I'm not even afraid anymore. Now, I lie awake at night wondering when she'll show up again. I wait for the paralysis, for the wait, for the smile. I feel her growing closer, not just physically but inside me. Like the more I see her, the more she becomes a part of me. Sometimes, when I'm alone in the mirror, I think I see her reflection instead of mine, just for a split second. A crooked smile. A slight tilt of the head. A glimmer of those dead white eyes. And sometimes, I smile back. I've stopped trying to stay awake. There's no point anymore. Because no matter how strong you think you are, once you look at her, she never leaves. And eventually, when you're too tired to fight it, you'll smile back too. Another one. I never believed in sleep paralysis until the night it pinned me to my bed like a corpse in a coffin, eyes wide open, limbs frozen, heart pounding so loud it sounded like footsteps in the walls. I had just moved into the old lakeside cabin my uncle left me in his will, a place that looked peaceful during the day but seemed to hold its breath after dark. On the third night, I woke up sometime after 3 a.m., unable to move or speak, staring into the corner of the room where the shadows looked deeper than they should have, and in that darkness I saw something. Someone, standing completely still, too tall, too thin, its face obscured by long wet hair that never stopped dripping onto the wooden floor even though there was no sound of water. My body screamed to run, but my muscles betrayed me. I could only watch as it took slow, jerky steps toward the bed, every movement unnatural, like its joints bent the wrong way, and as it drew closer, I noticed that its feet didn't touch the ground. They hovered an inch above it, yet the creaking floorboards groaned beneath it anyway. It stopped at the edge of the bed, and though I couldn't see its face, I felt its eyes too many in number, blinking out of sync, and when it finally bent over me, its breath reeked of rotting wood and stagnant lake water. It didn't speak at first, only hummed, a tune that seemed to come from inside my own skull, rising and falling like the waves outside the cabin. Then, without opening its mouth, I heard it whisper, "You brought me back when you opened the attic door." I didn't remember opening any attic, but the dream, or what I thought was a dream, I had the night before came rushing back. Me standing in the hallway upstairs, the old rope dangling from the ceiling hatch, my hand reaching for it without understanding why. I woke up gasping for air, drenched in sweat, my hands covered in dirt, and found the attic door ajar even though I'd never touched it. From that night on, the paralysis became a nightly ritual. Each time I opened my eyes, I couldn't move. And each time the figure was closer. Sometimes by the fireplace. Sometimes halfway across the room. Once, standing right over me, her face now visible, stitched shut from chin to forehead, yet still somehow smiling. I tried staying awake for days, pumping coffee and energy drinks into my veins until my hands shook and my vision blurred. But the moment I let myself blink too long, she returned. I consulted sleep specialists, priests, even local folklore experts, desperate for answers, and one old man at the town's antique bookstore said it wasn't a ghost. It was a revenant, the restless echo of a drowned soul pulled back from the water by memory and guilt, and now it was bound to me. I tried burning the attic shut. Didn't work. Tried moving out, she followed me. The paralysis started happening during naps now, during moments when I let my guard down, during car rides, in waiting rooms, in bathroom stalls. And each time I opened my eyes during those episodes, I saw her face more clearly, as if she was becoming more real, more human, and I less so. Eventually, I stopped sleeping altogether, and that's when the hallucinations, or what I thought were hallucinations, started during the day. I'd see her reflection in store windows, in puddles, in the glass of picture frames. I'd hear the dripping water behind me when the faucet wasn't running. I started locking myself in bright rooms with no shadows, no mirrors, no doors left ajar, but she found cracks in the light, thin slivers of darkness where she could slip through. The doctors diagnosed me with extreme sleep deprivation-induced psychosis, but no medication helped because it wasn't just in my mind. She was real and I had let her in. I began to lose time. Whole days gone. I'd wake up in unfamiliar places with mud on my shoes and lake water in my socks. Once, I found myself standing on the dock at midnight, holding a wet photograph of my uncle's cabin with the attic door wide open and a dark silhouette staring out from the top window. I don't remember taking that photo. I don't even own a camera. The last time it happened, 2 nights ago, I was paralyzed on the couch, eyes fixed on the ceiling, and she didn't come from the shadows this time. She rose straight up through the floorboards, dripping and twitching, her mouth wide open, not in a scream, but in a soundless wail that made every light bulb in the house explode. And this time she said something different. "You will sleep in the lake with me." I don't remember what happened after that. I just woke up in my bed with my clothes soaked and my lungs burning like I'd inhaled river water. There were footsteps, wet footprints, leading from the front door all the way to the attic. I live alone. I don't sleep anymore. I don't dream anymore. But I know one day soon I'll blink too long, and when I do I'll be back in that moment, stuck in that breathless space between wake and sleep, and she'll be there waiting, closer than ever, because each time I let her in, even for a second, she doesn't leave. She gets stronger. And the next time I open my eyes, I might not be able to shut them ever again. It started 1 month after I moved into the old duplex on Juniper Street, the kind of place that creaks and groans with every step and breathes with the wind, and the landlord said the other side was unoccupied, had been for over a year, which suited me fine since I needed quiet after the divorce and the messy breakdown that followed. But from my first night there, something felt off, like the walls themselves remembered things I didn't. like they were watching me adjust furniture and unpack. Memories I hadn't looked at in years. The place was always colder than it should have been, no matter how high I turned the radiator, and every night around 3 a.m., I'd wake up to the sound of scratching. Not inside my room, not even in the walls, but beneath the floorboards, slow, deliberate, like someone tracing invisible symbols with long, sharp nails. I told myself it was mice, or plumbing, or maybe just old wood settling into the cold, but the sound was too rhythmic, too intentional, and sometimes it would stop the moment I opened my eyes, like whatever it was could tell I was awake. One night it escalated. I woke up paralyzed, completely frozen except for my eyes, staring at the ceiling, unable to speak, and at first there was nothing, just the suffocating weight of dread and that horrible static-like hum in the air. But then I noticed something moving at the foot of the bed, a shape hunched low to the ground, not crawling but dragging itself forward with short, spastic jerks, and even though I couldn't move my head, I knew it had no face, just pale, stretched skin pulled tight where features should be, and it smelled like wet stone and copper. It reached the edge of the mattress and just sat there, watching me with what I can only describe as an overwhelming sense of hunger, not for food but something deeper, and when it leaned forward, its head tilted sharply to one side like a broken puppet, I felt it breathe onto my cheek, cold and damp, like the air before a storm, and in my head, not in my ears, I heard a voice, calm and cruel, say, "Don't scream. She's listening." I blacked out before it moved again, and the next morning, I woke up with my sheets torn and my fingernails bloodied, like I'd tried clawing my way out of something in my sleep. I convinced myself it was a dream, maybe even a hallucination brought on by stress, but the next night I put flour on the bedroom floor before I went to sleep just to be sure, and when I woke up, again paralyzed, the flour had been disturbed. Not footprints. Not handprints. Just long, thin drag marks that started from the hallway and ended exactly where the faceless thing had crouched the night before. The paralysis returned every other night, sometimes more often, and each time something new would change. The figure would get closer, or the room would be darker than normal, or I'd hear whispers coming from the empty side of the duplex, through the shared wall, like someone reading names in reverse, over and over. One time I heard someone knock from inside my closet. Just one knock. Then silence. I started sleeping with the lights on, but it didn't help, because during paralysis the lights flickered and failed, and in the sudden dark I always saw her. Not the faceless one, no, this was someone else, someone taller, impossibly thin, standing in the corner where the two walls met, arms hanging past her knees, head angled so sharply it almost touched her shoulder, and her eyes, pure black, not empty but full, watched me like I was already hers. I knew it was her, the one the faceless thing had warned me about. I think the faceless one was afraid of her too. I stopped going to work. I barely ate. I spent my days researching sleep disorders, hauntings, folklore, demonic visitations. Anything that would make this feel explainable, but nothing I found matched what I was experiencing. Most stories ended when the victim woke up. Mine was just beginning when I did. One morning, I noticed scratches on the inside of my bedroom window. Inside, like fingernails had been dragged down the glass from within. Another day, I woke up to find all the mirrors in the house turned toward the walls, though I hadn't touched them. Then came the dreams. I'd dream of her face pressed to mine, her cold hands on my chest, her voice whispering secrets I couldn't remember upon waking but that left me sick and disoriented all day, like her words were buried in my mind waiting to surface. The worst night was last Tuesday. I fell asleep on the couch, trying to avoid the bedroom, and woke up unable to move, standard at this point. But this time I was lying sideways facing the hallway and I saw her coming. Not walking, gliding. Her feet didn't touch the ground, and as she moved, every light she passed shorted out behind her one by one. I couldn't see her face until she was close, but when I did, it was like staring into a void that knew me, that hated and loved me simultaneously, and she leaned in until her lips brushed my ear and whispered, "You let him see you. Now he's inside." Then she smiled, horribly, and everything snapped to black. I woke up shaking, sobbing, heart racing so hard I thought I was dying. But it wasn't over. Because now, even when I'm awake, I catch glimpses of them. Not just shadows, reflections. I'll walk past a darkened screen and see movement that doesn't match mine. I'll hear voices coming from outlets and see static crawl across my phone screen when it's off. I've started sleeping with the doors open, the lights on, and all the windows locked tight, but none of it helps. They're not coming from outside. They're already here. I haven't told anyone because I don't think anyone could understand. And deep down, I know that every time I sleep, Every time I surrender to that paralysis, I'm opening a door. Not a physical one, but something else. Something older. Something hungry. Last night, during the paralysis, I saw the faceless one again. Only this time he wasn't alone. She was standing behind him, her long fingers resting on his shoulders like a puppeteer, her eyes locked on mine. And she spoke clear and loud with a voice that echoed inside my skull. "Soon you won't wake up. Soon you'll stay with us. I think tonight's the night." The air feels different again. Heavy. Still. Too quiet. I can feel the floor vibrating slightly under my feet, like something beneath the boards is shifting, listening. I don't want to sleep. I really don't. But I'm so tired. And when I blink, I swear I see her, standing right beside me. It started with the knocking, 3 soft, deliberate taps every night at exactly 2:59 a.m., coming from somewhere inside the apartment, though no matter how quickly I jumped out of bed or how many times I searched, I could never find the source. The walls were thin, but my neighbors insisted they heard nothing, and the building manager swore no one lived directly above or below me. I wanted to believe it was old pipes, maybe the structure settling, but something about the pattern, it was too purposeful, too knowing. It always came when I was in that strange half-sleep, just drifting on the edge of unconsciousness, and it always pulled me straight into paralysis. It started subtly at first, a numb tingling in my limbs, a pressure in my chest, a stillness in the room that felt too quiet, too dense, like even the air was holding its breath. Then came the sense of something watching. Not from the shadows, but from within the very fabric of the room itself, like the walls were alive and aware, and they were pressing in closer with each passing night. It wasn't long before I saw her. At first, just a silhouette in the corner, tall, unmoving, almost graceful in the way she stood with her hands at her sides, head slightly tilted like she was listening. I couldn't make out details, only the overwhelming sense that she didn't belong to this world. Her presence filled the room like smoke, thick and suffocating, and even though she never moved during those early encounters, I could feel her getting closer, like every second I stared at her she was gaining something, weight, substance, a foothold. On the 5th night, I woke up to her standing at the edge of the bed, close enough to see her face, or what was left of it. There were no eyes, just 2 hollow pits weeping a slow stream of black, oily tears, and her mouth was open too wide, as if the skin had been stretched and torn to keep her permanently smiling. She didn't speak, not with words, but her breath filled my head with static, a droning hum that vibrated through my teeth and made it feel like something inside my skull was moving. That's when the whispering began. Not from her, but from the corners of the room, dry, papery voices overlapping in strange tongues, circling around me, crawling under my skin. I tried to scream, tried to move, but my body refused. I was pinned like an insect under glass, and all I could do was stare as she leaned closer, her head twitching with unnatural precision, and placed one hand, cold as ice and damp like something pulled from a grave, on my chest. The instant her fingers touched me, I felt something leave my body, like she was peeling off a part of my soul, small and slow and agonizing. Then I woke up, gasping, drenched in sweat, the imprint of her fingers still burning on my skin. I called in sick to work that day, too shaken to function, and spent hours researching sleep paralysis, hauntings, folklore, anything that could explain her, but nothing matched. No demon, no spirit, no myth. She wasn't just a hallucination. She was real, and she was becoming stronger. I stopped sleeping after that. I stayed up for 3 days straight, drinking coffee, blasting music, pacing my apartment like a madman, but sleep always wins eventually, and when I finally passed out on the 4th night, I fell straight into it. No dreams, no slow descent, just her. She was already there when I opened my eyes. This time she wasn't standing. She was crouched beside my head, her mouth inches from my ear, and her hands still pressed firmly to my chest. But now I could hear what she was whispering. "Let me in," over and over, in a voice that sounded like broken glass dragged across stone. "Let me in. Let me in. Let me in." And then, still paralyzed, I was pulled. That's the only word I can use. My vision went black, but I was still awake, still aware, still stuck in my useless body, and it felt like something yanked me backward through a tunnel of ice and screams. When I came to, I was standing in my hallway, awake I think, but everything looked wrong. The light bulbs flickered, the shadows didn't match the angles they should have, and at the end of the hall stood a mirror I didn't own. It was tall, arched, antique looking, and in the reflection I wasn't alone. She was behind me, just over my shoulder, one hand gently resting on the back of my neck. I spun around, but the hall was empty. When I looked back, the mirror was gone too. After that, the lines between sleep and waking blurred completely. She appeared during the day now, in reflections in the corner of my eye, once even in a passing bus window, her face pressed against the glass as the vehicle sped by. I stopped trusting what I saw. I stopped trusting myself. I began to hear the knocks during the day. Always 3. Always from the other side of a closed door. I stopped answering them. One night, in the middle of another paralysis, I realized I wasn't alone in the room with her. There were others. Shadowy shapes lining the walls, unmoving but breathing. I could hear their shallow, rhythmic breaths. Dozens of them. Hundreds. As she stood over me, I felt them creeping closer, their presence like fingers on my scalp, behind my neck, at my ankles. I felt like I was being judged. Or worse, prepared. She leaned in again and said something new this time. "Soon your mouth will open too." That night, I woke up with my jaw dislocated. No explanation. The ER doctor said it must have been a seizure or a fall in my sleep, but I knew it was her. She was testing me, stretching me, getting me ready for something. I started seeing symbols on my walls, faint outlines like someone had scratched them into the paint with a nail. Spirals, crosses, runes I couldn't identify. They changed every night. I stopped trying to scrub them off. I knew they weren't meant to be erased. I think they're part of a language, a ritual. She's preparing something and I'm the altar. A few nights ago, during what I think was another waking paralysis, she climbed directly onto my chest. Not slowly, not carefully, but like a bird of prey pinning its kill. I felt her weight settle over me and something entered my mouth. Not physically, I don't know how to explain it. It was like her breath, her presence poured into me, thick and electric and oily, and I felt it coil inside my lungs. My fingers twitched. It was the first time any part of me had moved during one of these episodes, but it wasn't me controlling them. She was using my body like a puppet. When I finally broke free, I found claw marks on the inside of my mouth and dark smudges on the ceiling above my bed. I don't remember putting them there. Last night, I woke up standing in front of the full-length mirror in my hallway, barefoot, wearing the same clothes I'd gone to bed in, but my reflection didn't move. It stared back at me, then smiled, her smile too wide, too knowing, and whispered, "We are almost ready." My reflection moved before I did, and I ran. I ran out of the apartment, down the street, barefoot in the freezing rain, screaming. I don't know how long I ran or where I went. A neighbor found me hours later curled up on their porch, mumbling about shadows and symbols and mouths that shouldn't open. I haven't gone back. I'm typing this from a hotel room miles away. But I can already feel the weight in my chest again. I know she's found me. I know tonight she'll return. I know that this time I won't be able to move at all. Because last time, when she pressed her hand against my ribs, I felt something give way inside me. Something opened. And now I hear the voices even when I'm awake. They're louder, closer, practicing, rehearsing the words she'll speak through my mouth. I'm not sure I'll be the one who wakes up tomorrow.